Welcome back, everybody, to the sSEC Weekly Show. We've got a special edition of the show coming up. It's the basketball preseason preview for the sSEC. If you stumbled across this video for college sports, basketball, football, I'm just warning you now, this is not real college basketball. It's not real college football. It's not the real SEC. It's the Simulation Football Association picking up on basketball now as well. So go ahead, come check us out. Check out the links in the description. Football season's winding down. Bowl season's in full swing. Football playoffs about to kick off. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of unexpected things. Maybe your team's not going to do so well this year. You can take them over in the sim, make them a little bit better. Try to anyway. But let's start checking some stuff out. We've got a lot of stuff going on with basketball starting to pick up. It's not quite ready yet, but it's almost there. Tuscan's putting the final touches on the coding and everything. But I'm really excited. I know a lot of people are excited. It's going to be a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and start checking it out. We're going to take a deep dive into the SEC. Now, in college basketball for this simulation, we're going to a 28-game full season. It's going to be in the SEC, it's 18-game conference slate. So everybody's going to have the exact same amount of games. I know in the real world, you can have as little as 27 and as many as 29, I think, before you even get into conference championships. Might be off a little bit there. But it is 28 games for every team in the sim. The SEC is going to play 18 games. There's a couple conferences that play 20 games, like the ACC, I think, and a few others. But the SEC plays 18. We are going to take a quick look as well at the top 25 preview for the preseason. Now, these are my rankings. These might change a little bit as well before we get into the season itself. But this is what we've got for my preseason rankings. 3 teams from the SEC in the top 25. Missouri checking at the top at number 15. Kentucky down there at number 19, and South Carolina at 23. Now, the way I came up with these rankings is every team, their player attributes. So A, B, C, D. We're going to go over those in a minute, but the value of A would be 4 points. A D would be 1 point. Average all those up for every player for the entire team. That's what your score ends up being, and then it's just ranked out of that. So Appalachian State here is number 1. They have the highest average of player attributes, the most guys with A's. And if you take a look at the conference previews I've been doing on the forums, Appalachian State is absolutely loaded. Utah is up there as well. I'm not as impressed with Utah once I did the eye test previews. I'm not as impressed with Utah as I thought I would be. I think most of their grades probably falls in ball work and rebounding, but Utah is going to be a very good team. Akron's going to be a very good team. South Alabama is going to be a surprise, I think, for many people. New Mexico's going to be picking it up there as well with the success on the football field. Now, Florida International checking in as a team that hasn't had any gridiron action. They're going to be here for basketball because we have 172 teams in basketball. College football, we've only got the normal 135, I think, somewhere around there for FBS. We don't take the full 350 or so that it is for Division I basketball. We are taking all of the conferences that we have, plus the independents, and then we added a couple more conferences like the Big East, the Atlantic 10, and I forget the West Coast Conference. So we added a few more teams just to have some more variety. So Florida International coming in as another team. UTEP not seeing a whole lot of success on the football field. We should see them pretty successful on the basketball court though. Bowling Green, number 2 in the college football playoffs. They're going to be really good in basketball as well. I'm excited to watch them play. St. John's coming over from the West Coast. That is a very good team who played in the first season for 2020, who's going to be very good this year as well. Houston, that's a team you usually see in real life as well, who's pretty good. They're going to be good this year. Now, Missouri's going to be good. We're going to go over them later. Georgia, St. Bonaventure, South Dakota State, who's not in any of the conferences that we normally have, but they are a team from the original, so we carried them over. They are playing in the Mid-American Conference. They're going to be really good. Kentucky should be pretty good. I'm hoping we'll be good. There's some concerns there. Army is loaded. Army is stacked. Army's almost as good as Appalachian State on the eye test from what I saw. They are going to run the American Conference, I think. Texas State going to follow up and be another 1-2 great team from football to basketball. South Carolina should be good. TCU is looking like our highest ranked Big 12 team, but the Big 12 as an entirety is also going to be very good. And then Utah State checking in there at 25. Now, like I said, these are just a preseason. These are checked off from some weird math that's probably very bad. I do not expect this to look anywhere near like this a couple weeks into the season. Appalachian State, I do expect to be near the top. I do expect us to have two, maybe three SEC teams in the top 25. And for the SEC, that's kind of where we want to be. 2-3 teams. That's about the same as the real world too. And if we can just be as good as the real world SEC and conference, that's a good step off point because some of these teams are in rough shape. But before we jump into the teams and their makeup, let's take a quick look at how the attributes and everything that we're going to be looking at works. First and foremost, we're going to be seeing some things on there like height and stars and stamina. Height is a nice thing to see, but it's not important. Height is not it does not affect the game yet. That is something we're going to be looking at for the next season, the 2023 season. But right now, it's just a nice thing to see. Stars are the result of what the player's overall was while they were in high school. Stars, of course, don't carry forward. You guys should know this. They're not a representation of what you are. That's your overall. But they are an important recruiting mechanic, even though they can be misleading. And we're going to see that a lot as well. Some guys who have some really low stars are some of the best players in the country right now. Stamina, the stamina value is the maximum number of minutes that a player can play. If you have 34 stamina, you can only play 34 minutes of the 40-minute game. That's pretty simple. So looking at some of these attributes, of course, first we have the overall. The overall is just a sum of players' skills. And if we look in the bottom right here, we've got a small key. These are not exact. These may be slightly different, but these are the overalls that I came up with when I was first doing it. And if you look on the interface, they may be slightly different. I don't have any confirmation on what these numbers are, but we're going to use this as a judge. Anybody who's A is going to be a 70+ overall skills. And your Fs are going to be below 41. We won't see too many Fs. There are a few out there, very unfortunately, but we won't see too many. Attributes go from 1 to 20, and your overall is a sum of all of those, except for your 2 shooting and your 3 shooting. It's an average of those two. So an average of 2 and 3, plus finishing, plus ball work, plus rebounding, plus defense. That's how you get your overall. So just understand those going forward. If we see somebody with stars, the stars are a little bit less because, of course, these are high school guys. But a 5-star is somebody who's a 60+ overall, and a 1-star is a 26 to 36 overall. If you see somebody who's less than 26 overall, that's going to be a walk-on. They're not going to have any stars. So you're not going to see any of those this year, but that's important information for the next following years. Hitting through all these quickly. 2 shooting, of course, that's your mid-range shots. Anything outside of that paint, inside that 3-point arc. It's also your free throw shooting. So when you step to the line for a free throw shot, it incorporates your 2-point shot. That may be split out next year, but we'll see. 3-point shooting, very simple. Anything beyond that arc, 3-point shot, how well you can do it. That one's pretty simple. Finishing is down there at the bottom. Finishing is your 2-point paint shot. So anything that's a dunk, a layup, a layup, your tip shots, your putbacks, anything close to the basket inside that paint incorporates your finishing skills. So that's important for your big men, your centers, your forwards, your slashing guards, all those kind of stuff. Rebounding, of course, is rebounding. How well can you pull the ball off the hoop from a miss? Now, when we talk about rebounding, it is mostly a team value. It's going to sum it all up and it's going to compare it against the other team, and that's going to dictate which team pulls down the rebound. So the total of your team rebounding is very important, more so than your individual rebounding. So yes, an individual might have a very high rebounding, and that will help the team, but guys who have very low rebounding are going to pull it down so much that it's kind of going to offset. It's not going to be it's not going to help you at all to recruit guys who have low rebounding, because they are going to affect your high rebounding guys as well. Ball work is much the same way. Ball work is your dribbling, your passing, and it actually affects your turnovers. Your ability to hold on to the ball and not lose it out of bounds. Or if you kind of want to even think about it as IQ, those other turnovers incorporate just losing the ball, offensive fouls, and your shot clock violations. So if you have low ball work, you could be dropping the ball, losing it out of bounds, taking too long for your shot. You get a shot clock violation, all those kinds of things. So ball work is important as an IQ identifier and as the ability to move the ball around and keep your hands on it. That's important, just like rebounding, as a team sum. A lower or a higher ball work is going to prevent you from turning it over as much compared to another team's defense. But then individually, it also affects who's going to get assists. The higher ball work guys are going to be more prone to get assists. Defense, the last one to look at there. The defense is your prevention of the other team of scoring. You guys know what defense is, right? It's the prevention of the other team from scoring. It also affects the other team's turnovers, so your ability to stifle the shot and make those shot clock violations, get in there and take the charge, all those kinds of things. So defense is a very important team skill. It's not really effective as an individual skill. So when you're looking at defense, you're looking at team. When you're looking at ball work, you're looking at team. When you're looking at rebounding, especially, you're looking at team. Everything else is individual, and they can be very important. So with that knowledge in mind, let's start taking a look at some of these teams. First up, we are going to be taking up Alabama Crimson Tide. Alabama's looking a little rough. We've got a few guys here who are nice. We've got Mike Park, who's a 4-star recruit. He's a junior now, a 6'10 center. That's a very nice pickup. And as we go through these teams, you're going to see all of the A values highlighted, because those are your most valuable assets for each one of those players. So your A overalls are going to be highlighted. Your A 2-point shots are going to be highlighted. Those are the things we're really looking for. C's kind of average, of course, especially the higher C's. B to me is really super average. You want a guy with a B, and when you start hitting A's, that's what's important. That's what's going to put your team over the top. So I'm highlighting the A's on all of these guys. Not worrying about potential so much, because potential is looking at next year, and we're looking at this year right now. We're not looking at next year. We're looking at this year. So when we look at Alabama, we're looking at Mike Park. We're going to look at James Champagne, who's a 3-star junior center, 6'9". And this is where I'm talking about those stars are important to know, but they're not going to dictate how good your guy is, or how good a guy is in his entire career. Because even if you look at Ronnie Warner right above there, he's a 1-star recruit, a 6'11 center, but now he's a junior and he's a B value guy. So, and with him being a B overall, and he's split 3 C attributes and 3 B attributes, those have got to be high number attributes for him to be pulling a B overall and be having C's in there. So your stars, cool, great. Worry about them for your recruiting, but they are not the end all be all. And just to hit that one more from the other extreme, Michael Baptiste, right there, he's a 1-star who's a D, but he has an A value. So the rest of his values are probably very low in terms of their numbers. Even those Bs, those are probably the very low end of the spectrum on those Bs, the low end of the spectrum on that C, for him to be pulling a D. So just breaking into Alabama, they don't have a whole lot to rely on here. Mike Park is a good defense, and James Champagne, they're both great elite defenders who can rebound the ball as well. But when you look at the rest of the team, there's not a whole lot of defense to rely on there. So as a team, it's a weak defensive front. Shooting wise as well, they're not a great shooting team. We do see a couple guys hitting the A value in their 2-point. Michael Gordon, Reginald Dawson, Mike Park, James Champagne. Or I'm sorry, not those two either. Michael Baptiste, Robert Good, Scott Amos, Michael Gordon, and Reginald Dawson. Those are your A shooters. Those are the guys you're looking at shooting. But then when you look at the rest of the team, they don't even have any B shooters. They're all A's. Or all A's and then C's and D's. So unless those 5 guys can run the floor the entire time and be the only shooters, Alabama's not going to have a whole lot of offensive firepower. And when you look at the stamina, obviously you cannot run the entire game. James Champagne can get out there for most of the game at 37 minutes, and he's a pretty good finisher. He can get that ball underneath the basket, post up, sink a couple shots, and he can do elite and provide elite defense. And so can Mike Park. That elite defense, those rebounding shots, great finisher, but they cannot shoot away from the basket. And your guys who can shoot away from the basket are not very good at defense. So it's 2 halves of important things for Alabama that they cannot connect together. So it's going to be a rough year for them. Taking a quick look at their out-of-conference schedule, they have some it's not a terrible schedule for them. Texas is a good team, and they're going to have to go to Texas. And Oklahoma's a decent team for the Big 12 Challenge, but there's not a ton for Alabama to be super worried about here. So I think they're going to be okay in their out-of-conference, but they are going to have trouble in conference because there's much better teams in the SEC than Alabama this year. And so for that, I'm going to say that Alabama is probably going to miss the NCAA tournament this year. That's unfortunate for them, but maybe they can leverage some of these recruits that they're bringing in. Frederick Hartwell's a 3-star C overall guy who looks like he can develop into something. Hopefully Alabama can pull in some recruiting and get ready to compete next year or 2 years from now. But it's going to be difficult. It's going to be super difficult this year. It's going to be pretty difficult next year as well. But that's about as much as I can say. So let's take a look at the next team. We're going to be taking a look at Arkansas Razorbacks. Looking at their team, it's kind of a lot of the same. They're a little bit better defensively. We've got Kevin Ricci and Rafael Santillan, great defenders, really good rebounders as well. Freddie Hernandez is a pretty good defender who's an excellent rebounder. And then you have a few guys who are really good defenders and really good rebounders. Joseph Seifert, Jonathan McBride, Fong Moy. But again, the rest of the team, not very good at defense. And they're even worse at rebounding. So Arkansas, again, very much the same as Alabama. Not great defense as a whole team and not great rebounding. Shooting-wise, they're a little bit better. Fong Moy is an excellent 2-point shooter. James Staggs can shoot from both 2 and 3. He's a 6'4" guard who can't really get inside, so you can't rely on him to slash to the basket. But he's only a sophomore, so maybe that's a skill that he can develop a little. At a D value, he's probably not going to develop it too much, but he could pair it with an excellent rebounding and defensive skill. If he can continue to develop those, but it's not looking promising with a D, maybe next year James Staggs could be a stud for the Razorbacks, but it's going to be difficult. And that's next year. We're talking about this year, and there's not a whole lot to go around. They have an A shooter in 3-point, but the rest of the 3-point can't really be relied on. It's all C's, pretty much all C's. Close to the basket, though, Arkansas has some promise. Freddie Hernandez, Kevin Ricci, Jonathan McBride, Fong Moy, all A shooters close to the basket, so they can get really, really in there, post up close to the basket because those are all big men, and get some goals underneath. And then you have Donald Clouden who can slash, Charles Joseph who can get in there as well, Kevin Hauer who can move into the basket and get some, and then Charles Lee who's a freshman as well. These are guys who have good ability close to the basket, but it's just not consistent. So I'm worried that Arkansas isn't going to have the consistency to keep up this year. Taking a look at their out-of-conference schedule, theirs is a little tougher. Iowa's a decent team. Pepperdine, not great. Pacific, not great. They've got a couple West Coast teams who really aren't great, but they have to go out there and all the way to the West Coast and take them on. They've got a preseason top 25 team there in FIU, Florida International, in week 3B, so that's going to be a tough game for them. Davidson isn't going to be an easy game either. And then Oklahoma State is going to be their Big 12 challenge. Oklahoma State's going to be better than Arkansas, I'm sure. So that's a tough out-of-conference slate for a team who just isn't going to be consistent this season. So for them, I also say that they're going to miss the NCAA tournament. There's going to be quite a few SEC. There's going to be more SEC teams that I'm predicting miss the NCAA tournament than make it. I think that's going to end up being wrong, but it's going to be tough because some of these teams just really aren't very good. Let's take a look at our last team of the day. We're going to be taking a look at the Auburn Tigers. It's really much of the same. Actually, I even think Auburn is in way worse shape because if we look at them, a whole bunch of D's right there in the overalls and in scattered throughout their attributes. They have much less A's to look at as well, but the A's that they do have, and where they are better than both Arkansas and Alabama that we've checked out already, is their finishing, those close to the basket scoring. We've got Nicholas Killian who can score, David Gurry who can get in there, Douglas Kims is a great scorer as well, and Antoine Casey. All four of those guys can get in close, and then they're backed up by pretty much everybody else on the team. Everybody on this team is pretty good at close to the basket scoring. However, once they get away from the basket, you can pretty much forget about it. You got a couple guys who can shoot two-pointers, Jose Harrell, Blaine Miyazaki. I'm going to butcher that name all season. And Miyazaki can shoot the three-point as well. Cody Kenny can shoot some two-pointers. But the three-point shooting is just abysmal. You might as well forget about that and not even try most of the time. Two-point shot is not great at all either. So they really can only rely on their close to the basket scoring, and that is not a recipe for success. You have to be able to move the ball around the court and score from all different angles. Defensively, though, on the defense, the Tigers are actually a pretty good team. Killian, Kims, Angel, all A value defensive, so those are elite level defenders. And then most of the guys are all B's, and then you got a couple C's scattered in there. So defensively, the Tigers are in really good shape. It's the scoring that's going to be a problem, and if they can use that defense to prevent the other teams from scoring, This is a John Madden trope, right? Score more points than the other team. If they can do that, they'll win, right? Of course, we know that. But Auburn is going to have to rely on their defense to stop the other team from scoring more than they're going to be able to rely on themselves to outscore the team. And in college basketball, in basketball in general, that's not generally a recipe for success. Rebounding wise, they're a pretty good team as well. Killian, Kims, Jackson, most of the same guys. They're great great rebounders, but the rest of the team is pretty much average to bad. John Mason, Carl Barnes, terrible rebounders. Kind of want to keep you might even want to keep those guys off the court because at freshmen who are 3-stars who are supposed to be guys you can rely on to build your program on, they're just not very good. I hate to say it that way, but they're just not very good. Now they can develop. Of course, they've got the B potentials and then a C potential, and they can get better. But right now, the Tigers are not in a good position to succeed. And when we look at their out-of-conference schedule, it's rough. I mean, they're taking on TCU the first week of the season. That's probably a guaranteed loss because TCU is a good team. Penn State's not anything to sneeze at either. SMU's looking pretty good. San Jose, not bad. Xavier's a good team as well. Iowa State, not terrible at all either. And then you got Kansas for their Big 12 challenge, and Kansas is going to be one of the toughest teams in the Big 12 to take on this season. So the Tigers have a bad-looking out-of-conference slate where they're then also going to go into the SEC where they're one of the worser teams in the conference. So that's going to be a tough season for them, which doesn't spell too good for their recruiting efforts either. So next year might be just as rough, but this year I am predicting that they're going to miss the NCAA tournament as well. So that's the Tigers, that's the Razorbacks, that's the Crimson Tide. I'm not going to do all 14 teams tonight. That is a lot for us to go over because we also went over the top 25. We went over kind of what the attributes do. So I am going to break up this preseason preview into 3 different parts. This first part is the introduction. We're checking out the first couple teams and that top 25, introducing everybody to the games, kind of understand what's going on. Next episode, we are going to break down even more teams. That will just be a team breakdown. And then the last episode will be a few more teams, and then we'll check out, first game slates, see how everybody's going to do, and I'll give you guys my predictions for how the SEC is going to finish. So I appreciate you guys checking in. I hope you guys check out the website, check out college basketball. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm super excited. I know a lot of other people are excited too. It's going to be a great time. I will check you guys in.